Thank you, Ranjan, for that very elaborate introduction. Ms. Buvero, Mr. Jejling, Ms. Ghosh, Mr. Sastri, Rajan Matthew, members of DOT, FICCI and industry and friends. At the outset, let me congratulate all those who put the report that I released together. I had a chance to go through that report, and I believe that the report has highlighted the 3 or 4 most important issues that we in the Ministry of Communications believe are critical to the future growth of this sector. Incidentally, the Prime Minister in his address this morning spoke about exactly the same issues: connecting rural India, broadband penetration, domestic manufacturing, and of course, environmentally sustainable growth in the sector. So I'd like to congratulate all the stakeholders who put that report together. I think it's a very pertinent report. Coming to the topic of today, which is leveraging telecom for connecting India, I'm very pleased to be part of this distinguished panel of people who I know quite well. Mr. Sastri, just a few hours ago, we had a chance to visit his stall in Pragati Maidan exhibition and see the good work that CDOT is doing. And I'd like to welcome each and every one of the participants who are taking part in India Telecom 2012, especially those who've come in from overseas. This has been my second year at this forum, and I can tell you, as Mr. Chandrasekhar, our secretary, said before me, that it's a great learning experience for all of us in DOT to understand the trends that are taking place globally, to see entrepreneurs trying to move their innovations from R&D laboratories to the marketplaces. So it's extremely inspiring for all of us to try and create an incentive mechanism and an environment that allows people in different parts of the sector to do very, very well. I don't think there's any debate on the topic of whether the telecom sector has connected India, or for that matter, to go a step further, whether it's even empowered India. I think both are foregone conclusions, both are a no-brainer. There's no doubt that this has been one of the most enabling pieces of infrastructure in our country in modern times that has really empowered the young and old, the urban and rural, the rich and the poor. In the area of voice alone, when we look at the figures of teledensity growth, each of us can take ourselves back to where we were in 98, when the country only had 2% teledensity growth. And that was just around the time that the CMTS licenses were awarded, when cellular and wireless growth was beginning to happen in India. And at that time, just 2% of our country's population had access to voice services. 5 years later, that was 5%. In 2003, when, as Rajan said, I was considering getting into politics, the teledensity rate in our country was 18%. It was 5%. In 2007 then, it was 18%. And at present, from its value in 2007, it's more than quadrupled. Today we have 77 or 80% teledensity in the area of voice. So voice has, of course, as a country, we've primarily chosen wireless technologies over wireline technologies. And in the area of voice services, we have done very well. Has it connected and empowered India? Most certainly. Is there scope for growth in this area also? Definitely. Rural areas still require more attention. We are doing quite well using our Universal Service Obligation Fund to attract industry to invest in rural infrastructure. Still isn't enough. A lot more needs to be done to connect our rural areas, people living in villages, our farmers, to the most basic of telecommunication services, which is voice. But by and large, with a 77% teledensity rate, it's fair to say that we have all seen the positive effects of the voice telecommunications revolution. I think what's important to highlight alongside that, while different governments have tweaked, modified their policies, in some cases made large public investments to achieve this high teledensity growth in the area of voice, we, especially the UPA government, has also tried to look at looking at the issue of teledensity, looking at telecommunications for the consumer more holistically than simply providing them with access to services. Two very small examples of that are that in the area of radiation, something Rajan Matthew knows I'm very passionate about, we've actually implemented a regime starting from September 2012, where we are one of the few countries in the world that has some of the most stringent limits for EMR coming out of mobile towers and BTS sites, and to even control the specific absorption rates from handsets. And we're very hopeful of implementing and enforcing this. So we've taken care of a potential health hazard also, given the fact that conclusive data may not be out there globally. We've ensured that while we're providing voice telephony to millions of Indians, we also want to ensure that they stay safe and healthy. Similarly, MNP, I think mobile number portability, which was launched maybe almost 2 years ago, has done very well in India. It's done far better in India than it's done in many other countries where MNP has been in existence. And that's also an example of giving the consumer a choice to choose different operators, yet retain their number. There could be many reasons for that. Could be quality of service, could just be a brand association that they feel strongly with. So this is the way we've tried to look at the telecommunications sector in India. We've tried to encourage growth in the voice area, but yet create some kind of a regulatory framework that suits the India context. Moving forward, we have to obviously move towards data. There are many ways that one can do this. And I think what we are trying to do, looking at our experience in the area of voice, where rural teledensity still hasn't taken off, or it still hasn't reached a figure that we'd be comfortable or happy with. We don't want to repeat that same problem in the area of broadband connectivity. And while we have just about 22.5 million broadband connections, of which I think 70% are wireline connections and the rest are through wireless data cards, we want to ensure that the data revolution happens in rural areas at the same time as it happens in urban areas. And for this, in addition to a policy framework, the government has decided to make a large public investment to roll out an OFC network in rural areas using our USO fund, so that we create the basic aggregate layer of fiber connectivity. We provide backhaul, which then makes it perhaps easier for industry to provide last mile connectivity. They don't have to worry about backhaul issues and other infrastructure issues. So our aim is really that once this data revolution begins to happen in the country, we see growth happening in rural areas and urban areas alongside one another at the same time. But I think while we all talk about, and I'm sure the seminar and the next day or two will have a lot of discussion on the data revolution and its impact, and that this is how we're going to do it, and this is the multiplier effect. I have to say that since we're talking about empowering India, there are some concerns also, and we should try and address that. Perhaps if not in this panel, in another panel discussion. Because when we are looking at really implementing this data revolution in the country, it's important to again look at the entire ecosystem. The three most important parts that I see in this ecosystem after this broadband network is brought out to panchayats and rural areas is number one, how does it make it attractive for industry to utilize this backhaul infrastructure and provide last mile connectivity, wireless, wireline through BSNL's copper network or other forms of infrastructure. The second, of course, is the cost, availability, and even the nature of customer premise equipment. What will it look like? Will people access devices, internet on handhelds, on a handset, on a common service center or kiosk? Will it be on a computer, on a laptop? Nowhere in the world can we really say for sure that this is going to be the device of the future. But how do we innovate to be flexible enough to choose the device that works best for India? How do we innovate to keep the cost of that customer premise equipment as low as possible, while at the same time we're looking at a policy to make ourselves an electronic system design manufacturing hub. We want to encourage more manufacturing of electronics and particularly telecom related electronics in India. So those are also serious issues that should be deliberated on. Will domestic manufacturing help reduce the price, the end price of customer premise equipment for the end consumer? Maybe it won't. So that is a very big part of this ecosystem that we need to think of very, very clearly. And of course, the last is, in my opinion, the most important, which is really the content. Because just building this network and building this infrastructure for people to know about a Bollywood song is not our intention. It's the content that will really connect India and that will really empower India. The rest is something that the average consumer and the average user doesn't really know about, care about, or understand. It's the content that will attract the person to use that service and sustain the usage of that service. So how do we really create an environment to encourage entrepreneurs to assist us in our e-governance effort, to make what exists in government today in electronic form? One way that we're exploring doing that is through legislation, by making it mandatory. But there are many other forms. Ideally, we should have a system where a set of incentives are created where private sector, industry partner with the government and create this content. That to me is the most crucial part of making this data revolution and this broadband revolution take off in India. So with those words, I'm once again very happy to be here. I will request the moderator to permit me to leave a little early because we have a meeting with the Planning Commission in the other ministry I represent, which is the Ministry of Shipping. But I'll try and stay here for as long as I can so I get a chance at least to listen to some of the other panelists. Thank you very much.